Hello everyone, it is so good to see you once again checking out our look at the Disney Lorcana Comprehensive Rules. Today we'll be looking at Chapter 7. This will be looking at abilities, and abilities get a little bit more in-depth. We're going to spend a little bit more time on this. I'm going to try to diversify the amount of examples that we use and help us understand, all the different things that happen. It's important to remember when we look at abilities that we look at what is on the card. We look at the words that are on the card. There's an old saying in the TCG space, read your cards. I spent a lot of time playing games like Yu-Gi-Oh!, which, if we take a look over here, can sometimes be really, really bulky. You've got plenty of things that you have to read for that game, plenty of words, plenty of things that can be a little bit daunting. However, the way that we understood this game was just by reading the words that we see and being able to understand that those words have meaning. While Lorcana does not have the same text rules that a game like Yu-Gi-Oh! Would have, we still are able to understand everything that is happening because we have guidelines for how cards are written. And those guidelines will tell us when things happen, why things happen, what order they resolve in, and when they'll resolve. Let's take a look at our examples. We'll start off with section 7.1, just the general section. 7.1.1 states, each clause of a card is a separate effect and or cost. Each clause is separated by a period. Let's take a look at a very simple card. This is Jafar the Lamp Thief. He has the ability, I am your master now. When you play this character, look at the top 2 cards of your deck. Let's demonstrate here. So, when I play the character, I will look at the top 2 cards of my deck. Fantastic. Let's get some more cards in that deck. I'm looking at the 2 cards. Let's see. Great. That clause is finished. Next clause. Put one on the top of your deck and the other on the bottom. Great. So let's take Baloo. So we'll put Baloo on the top of my deck and Pinocchio on the bottom. What else do we do? Nothing. The card is finished. The effect has finished resolving. It'll go to our discard pile. 7.1.2 states, cards that list one or more costs or effects in a single clause resolve based on the intervening word. So we had right here in our old Jafar card that, if we can go back just one more, we have in our old Jafar card, when you play the character, look at the top 2 cards of your deck. That is one thing that we do. Put one on the top and one on the bottom. Great. Those are things that we do. But sometimes there will be multiple actions that may come up in a single sentence. Even that one there. And connected, putting the card on the top and the card on the bottom. Let's take a look at how we understand things. Most cards are written as A, which is just, it has an effect. Here's Dragonfire. What does Dragonfire do? Banish chosen character. Great. Choose a character, banish it. Fantastic. Resolves. We're done. We love Dragonfire. It's our best friend. But of course, things get more complex. We scroll down. We go to 7.1.2.2. A to B. The player must pay the cost described in the first part of the clause A. If they're unable to do that, they can't finish resolving the effect in the second part of the clause B. The first part of the clause A is a cost, not an effect. The second part of the clause B is an effect. Let's take a look at this action song here, Teeth and Ambitions. This card is written, deal 2 damage to chosen character of yours, to deal 2 damage to another chosen character. Let's go ahead and break that down. Deal 2 damage to chosen character of yours. Okay, so I pay my costs. I pay 2. I'm going to play Teeth and Ambition. First part. I'm going to deal 2 damage to my chosen character. And then, because I did that, I can deal 2 damage to another chosen character. Let's say I can't do Zazu again. I can't give him 4 damage because the card says to another chosen character. So I guess Jafar is my target. Great. We have fulfilled both parts. So Teeth and Ambition will resolve. The game state check will happen. Jafar has 2 damage counters and 2 willpower. Boom. Zazu has 2 damage counters, 1 willpower. Boom. They are both discarded. However, let's say that our board looked more like this. All right, I'm going to pay 2. I'm going to play Teeth and Ambition. Let's read the card with this board. Deal 2 damage to chosen character of yours. Okay, let's see. I don't have any characters. Well, because I don't have any characters, and this says 2, I can't deal 2 damage to either of these. So the card finishes resolving. It'll go to our discard pile. Note, and we'll mention this a few more times, but note that as long as we were able to pay the cost of playing the card, we can play the card all we want. Let's say this is our ink, and we do 1, 2. We declare we're going to play Teeth and Ambition. We pay the 2 ink. We put it on the field. At that moment, that is a legal play. We have paid the cost of playing Teeth and Ambition. But this part here is the cost of playing the ability. So we try to do as much as we can. So, okay, we've paid 2, Teeth and Ambition. Couldn't do the first part, so now we can't do the second part. So now it is resolved. It goes in the discard. It's not a situation where it is an illegal play because legality goes into playing the card, not resolving the effects. Let's go ahead and take a look at our next section. 7.1.2.3 states, A, then B. Resolve all effects as much as possible, even if some of the effects can't be resolved. Here we have the card, We Don't Talk About Bruno. This card can be sung for 5, and it states, return chosen character to their player's hand. Then that player discards a card at random. So let's see, okay, I'm going to sing We Don't Talk About Bruno. I'm going to have Jafar exert to sing the card. Okay, so now the effect starts, the ability starts. I go, okay, let's return Jafar to my opponent's hand. Great. So we return Jafar to the opponent's hand. Fantastic. Then that player will discard a card at random. So that card is owned by my opponent. They will discard a card at random. But uh-oh. Magica Dispel. Magica Dispel states, during opponent's turns, if an effect would cause you to discard 1 or more cards from your hand, you don't discard. So for that player, I am his opponent. It is an opponent's turn, and there is a card effect that is going to have him discard a card. Magica Dispel's effect happens, and he does not discard that card. This still resolves, though. We don't talk about Bruno, still happens. The song is sung, the card is returned to the hand, but even though we did not discard a card, this was still a legally played move. It resolves as much as it can, and it goes to our discard pile. In Lorcana, we use the word and in a very fun way. 7.1.2.4 states A and B. Resolve all effects as much as possible, even if some of the effects can't be resolved, or and seems to tie the effects together as though the wording were A to B. Sometimes and simply serves its normal grammatical purpose. We have up here on the screen the Queen, commanding presence, which I do not own. But it states, whenever this character quests, chosen opposing character gets -4 strength this turn, and chosen character gets +4 strength this turn. In situations like these, you would still resolve as much as you could. So let's pretend Jafar is the Queen. Jafar quests, fantastic. Let's say Magica Dispel gets -4 of strength, and let's say the Queen gets +4 strength. Fantastic. They'll get that for the turn. However, if there's nothing on board, Jafar quests, Fantastic. Nothing can get -4, but the queen will still get +4 because it has to resolve as much as it can. The and generally just the and mostly just states that these things happen simultaneously, which is where our second example is, and where things seem to focus on just the natural grammatical sense of and. Let's pull up one of our fun cards. A new card that came out in this set, Magical Aid. Magical Aid says chosen character gains Challenger +3, and when this card is banished in a challenge, return this card to your hand this turn. Fantastic. So what that means is, let's go ahead, we'll pay 3, 1, 2, 3 to play Magical Aid. Fantastic. Simultaneously, Jafar gets Challenger +3 and this other effect that is on the card. So that is added onto what he already has. So let's say, okay, he's there, he's gonna challenge something that's really big, and he is gonna get banished. Okay, he is banished in the challenge, Magical Aid goes off, or Jafar's effect from Magical Aid goes off, Jafar goes to the hand. Let's look at May. If an ability or effect contains the word may, the player who played the card that generated the effect can choose whether they want it to happen. If the player chooses not to have it happen, no part of the you may clause is performed. Let's take a look at a board here. We're going to go ahead, let's put just any character right here, and we're going to look at the card Hades, Infernal Schemer. Let's go ahead and put him up. Hades Infernal Schemer is a card that says, when you play this character, you may put chosen opposing character into their player's inkwell face down. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to spend 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're going to go ahead and play Hades Infernal Schemer. But maybe for whatever reason, I don't want to send a character to the inkwell. So I say, okay, no effect Hades. Fantastic. That finishes off. Let's take a look at a card that does not have that effect. This card right here is Yzma. Yzma states, when you play this character, shuffle another chosen character into their player's deck. That player draws 2 cards. I'll go ahead and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to go ahead and play Yzma. Yzma's effect goes off. But maybe you don't want it to go off. I'm like, I really want to play Yzma, but I don't, want to. I don't want to do anything. My opponent has nothing. I have a Hades on board, but I don't want to send him back. Well, because this does not say may, you have to perform the effect if able. Let's say if Yzma is the only card on the field, we pay 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, Yzma, there will be no targets because the card says another chosen character. So Yzma's not a valid target. There are no other valid targets. Nothing happens. But if there is a valid target, be careful, because then that effect will have to happen. I'll have to choose Hades to go back into my deck. I will have to shuffle that deck and then draw 2 cards. But if it's a may, like it is with Hades, I have that choice. 7.1.4 states, if an ability or effect puts a card into your hand from any other zone, that is not considered drawing a card. Let's take a look at Vision of the Future. This card states, look at the top 5 cards of your deck. Put 1 into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So we'll go ahead and draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, let's see. Let's put Donald Duck in my hand. We're going to go ahead and put that card in our hand and put the 4 at the bottom of the deck. Putting this card in my hand is not considered drawing. So that means that effects that are based off drawing will not activate. Let's take a look at that in practice. I have an exerted Jafar on my field. Jafar's effect states, during your turn, while this character is exerted, whenever you draw a card, gain 1 lore. He is exerted. I'm going to spend 2 to play that Visions. We'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Put those 5 in my hand. Let's say I take Piglet. Okay, we'll go ahead and put Piglet into the hand. Put the 4 on the bottom. Do I get lore? No, because I did not draw the card. What is drawing? Anytime the card says draw. If it does not say draw, it is not drawn. That's why I always say it's important to read the exact words that we're using in cards, because that'll give you insight as to when triggers go off. We talked about this card a little bit, but we'll go ahead and go over it in more detail. 7.1.5 states, if an ability or effect refers to another or other, it refers to a card that any card that effect or ability does not originate from, or one that was not already selected by the ability. So that means when we play Yzma, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there's a 6th one right there. We'll go ahead and play Yzma. I cannot choose Yzma as a target. I have to say, okay, I played Yzma, we will target Piglet. Piglet will go into the deck, they'll be shuffled into the deck, then that player will draw 2 cards. That player referring to the opponent because it was their card put in their deck. If Jafar went into my deck, I would draw the 2 cards because I am that player. The word other also refers to just passive effects as well. Let's take a look at our wonderful friend Cogsworth. Cogsworth states, your other characters gain resist +1. Great, so that means Cogsworth does not gain his own resist +1. This Robin Hood will, and this other Cogsworth will. Conversely, this other Cogsworth, who has the same effect, will give +1 to Robin Hood and +1 to Cogsworth. To map that out using dice, that means that Robin Hood will have 2 resist that he's gaining from each of these cards. This Cogsworth will have 1 resist, and this Cogsworth will have 1 resist that they are gaining from each other. Since we have Robin Hood out, I think he'll be very helpful for explaining our next clause. 7.1.6. If an ability or effect instructs you to play a card as part of resolving that ability, you must resolve the ability before playing the card. If the instruction is followed by additional steps for resolving that ability, the card doesn't resolve or come into play until the ability is fully resolved, even if it's moved to a different zone. Let's go ahead and check out what we mean. If I can get the right Robin Hood in front of me, we need our friend the Sharpshooter. So Robin Hood Sharpshooter states, whenever this character quests, look at the top 4 cards of your deck. You may reveal an action card with cost 6 or less and play it for free. Put the rest in your discard. So let's go ahead and see. Let's go ahead and get our deck together. Okay, so I've got Robin Hood. He's somehow still on board, and I quest. Okay, Robin Hood's effect goes off. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, here's my hand. I think I'm going to choose a whole new world. I go ahead and reveal that action card, a whole new world, and then we play it? Nah, not yet. Not yet. Because Robin Hood has to finish resolving before Whole New World is played. So we'll say, okay, this is the revealed card. We'll put it to the side. Now these other 3 cards are going to be discarded. They're going to go into the discard pile. Now Robin Hood's effect has finished resolving. We resolve Whole New World right after. You want to make sure, it's an important thing to remember about all cards, is that we do not have interruption within the resolution. We do not activate other cards while things are resolving. We don't jump in and say, nope, can't do that because this happened now. The card will finish resolving, and when other things happen, they are added to the bag, or they wait to activate. But the card must finish resolving. So once it is done resolving, then a whole new world is played. And any effects that happen from whole new world go into the bag. So let's say, for instance, my opponent has our wonderful friend Diablo, which I do not own. During your opponent's turn, whenever they draw a card, while this card is exerted, you may draw a card. Let's say Yzma is him. So, Robin Hood goes off, this happens, I play a whole new world. I draw 7 cards. 5, 6, 7. Diablo's triggers, like we discussed earlier, will enter the bag. They won't activate, they won't interrupt a whole new world. My opponent will finish resolving their version of whole new world, so they'll discard what they've got, they'll draw 7 cards. Great. Whole new world has resolved. Then Diablo's triggers happen. Then, and that's a whole other mess that we'll discuss later, but essentially, then Diablo will go off after whole new world has finished resolving, not during. Section 7.1.7 states, sometimes a combination of abilities can be repeated indefinitely, called a loop. If all players are aware of and understand the actions of each iteration of the loop, the player who maintains the loop proposes a specific number of iterations. The game is considered to proceed immediately through those iterations without the player performing each one. Then the game continues and a new action must be taken. As games evolve, eventually there are ways, whether intentional or unintentional, to where things can happen infinitely. There are not a lot of very popular loops that exist in Lorcana right now, nor are they always completely infinite. The closest one that I can think of off the top of my head involves these 3 cards, one of which I do not own. It's a common theme for us. Let's talk about the one I don't have first. Dr. Felicier states, whenever one of your other characters is banished in a challenge, you may return that card to your hand. Now we have another Cogsworth card, this time Cogsworth, the Illuminary Watchman. This states, when you play this character, chosen character gains rush this turn. Now let's look at the last card, Imperial Proclamation. Imperial Proclamation states, whenever one of your characters challenges another character, you pay 1 less for the next character you play this turn. Let's view this in action. I've got a big body on board. I have got Yzma. And Imperial Proclamation is on. Yzma's on my opponent's board. Cogsworth is here. Felicier is on board. I say, okay, I'll go ahead and pay 1 to play Cogsworth. Cogsworth's effect, I'll give him Rush. Fantastic. Cogsworth will hit into Yzma. Cogsworth is banished. Dr. Facilier states, whenever one of my other characters is banished in a challenge, I can return that card to my hand. Fantastic. He's in my hand. We got him back. We saved him from the infinite discard pile. Imperial Proclamation goes off. Whenever one of your characters challenges another character, you may pay 1 less for the next character you play this turn. So when I challenged, this effect got queued up. I pay 1 less for the next character I play that turn. Oh look, Cogsworth is a 1-drop. That means that I can play him for free, because I can legally pay 0 to play him again. So I will deal another damage to Yzma. This here goes off, get in my hand, Proclamation goes off, go to Cogsworth, I'll deal another one. So on and so forth. What we do for game state, rather than just sitting and going, okay, deal another damage, Felicier goes off, Proclamation goes off, Cogsworth, another damage, we'll usually be able to state that make sure the players understand the loop that is going on and determine a number of iterations. So we'll say, okay, we'll go through this loop 4 times to take out the Yzma. Fantastic. Cogsworth will end up in my hand at the end of that. And then the game will go on as normal. Any effects that happen would go in the bag, and they would resolve as normal. This is a way for us to make sure that we're not in situations where people are kind of stalling infinitely out for time. This one is not technically an infinite loop because we have, of course, they have to have things that are on board. I guess if you have something with resist +1, you could technically make it infinite. So, like, if you have something like, if your opponent's board looks something like this, where it says, okay, Donald Duck has resist +1, Cogsworth does 1 damage, so, and Donald Duck, this Donald Duck here, which I'll pull up for us, Donald Duck, Musketeer Soldier, he has Bodyguard, so I can't choose Cogsworth as a valid target. In that case, this would be infinite, because I deal no damage, Felicia happens, I can play this infinitely. There is no game state reason for doing this. There is no reason other than just stalling or maybe getting a laugh out of your friends. But if this happens in a game, we have to declare a certain number of iterations. You can say, this happens a million billion times. That's fine. The game state, it has to, we have to progress the game. Otherwise, we run into things like slow playing, we run into things like stalling, we run into things of games going into draws because of time, where things didn't have to happen. So we have a rule that states, choose a number, and things just happen. We assume, okay, that happened that many times, wasn't that funny, let's go ahead and continue the game with a new action or ability. 7.1.8 talks about if resolving an effect allows a player to choose up to n of something, the player can't pick the same choice for each iteration of n. Up to includes 0 as a legal choice. I had a different card up, but I think this one explains it a little better. Here we have the card, It Calls Me. It Calls Me states, draw a card. Yay. Then, choose up to 3 cards from chosen opponent's discard and shuffle them into the deck. What the first part of this states is that I can't choose the same card twice. So I can't say, okay, I'm going to do Grandma Tala, and then I'm going to do Lena Saberwing, and then I'm going to choose Grandma Tala again. That would not be a valid choice. If there are 2 different Grandma Talas, then yes, by all means, go ahead and choose those 2 separate Grandma Talas. But you can't choose the same target twice. What the second part of this means is that up to is a very specific phrase. That means you can choose anywhere between 0 and n. So for It Calls Me, I draw my card, and then I can choose up to 3 characters or cards from my chosen opponent's discard and shuffle them into their deck. So here's my opponent's discard. I can choose nothing. I can say, okay, I choose 0. Pass turn. Or, I can choose 1, I can choose, I can choose 2, I can choose 3. Any number of that is legal. But 0 is an acceptable choice as well. And the card will resolve as much as it can. Interestingly enough with this card, it is ruled that even if you put 0 inside of the deck is still shuffled because you are resolving as much as you can. You're putting air into the deck, you shuffle the deck, effect resolves, boom. If it stated, choose up to 3 cards from chosen opponent's discard to shuffle them into the deck, then you would not shuffle the deck if there's 0 because there is no target. But because you can choose 0, you would still have to do the shuffling because the effect can still legally resolve. 7.1.9 states, some abilities and effects use that in their texts to refer to something specific. Here we have, once again, we don't talk about Bruno, which will state, return chosen character to their player's hand. Then that player discards a card as random. 7.1.9.1 states, if card text references a specific zone where that card is put or located, only that zone is checked. If reference by that has changed zones, the effect checking that zone for that card fails and resolves for no effect, even if there are other cards whose full name matches the full name of that card. So this is interesting in the context of we don't talk about Bruno, because it is referring to a player as that. The way this would work in Bruno's effect, let's say, as he mentioned earlier, we spend 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to play We Don't Talk About Bruno on a completely empty board. So we go ahead, no card is returned to hand, then the game looks for that player. Well, that player doesn't exist because nobody fulfilled the effect. Therefore, the effect does not go off. However, we'll also talk about the example used in this book, because we want to make sure that we're seeing it in characters as well. Ursula, Deceiver of All, is a ruling powerhouse. It is such an interesting little card that's always fun to share. I don't own it, as I do many of these Emerald cards. Let's go ahead and read what it does. Whenever this character sings a song, you may play that song again from your discard for free, then put it at the bottom of the deck. It truly is such a deal. Let's see how that works in practice. We're going to call this Ursula, Deceiver of All. Ursula, Deceiver of All is going to sing Teeth and Ambition. Fantastic. We exert for cost. We do 2 damage onto Ursula. We do 2 damage onto Nala. The card goes to the discard. Now this states you may play that song again from your discard for free, then put it on the bottom of your deck. So we'll go ahead and we will play the card again. That will happen. Take 2 more damage, go to 4. Nala will go to 4 as well. Then this we put on the bottom of our deck instead of the discard. Fantastic. Both of these resolve. 4 damage counters, that goes away. 4 damage counters, that goes away. It's a little bit of an interesting ability because it works a little bit differently than how we may expect it to. This specific text is in reference to the ability to sing together. Let's look at a card that talks about singing together. This is Under the Sea. This is a Sing Together 8, which says any number of you or your teammates' characters with total cost 8 or more may exert to sing this song for free. Put all opposing characters with 2 strength or less on the bottom of their players' decks in any order. So we'll say, okay, we have 2 Ursula, Deceiver of Alls right here. We're going to exert 3, 6, and Lena Saberwing for 7 and 8. We're going to sing Under the Sea. Fantastic. Nala will go to here. Oh no, how unfortunate. So then, this card will go to the discard pile. Then, whatever Ursula we choose to resolve first will go ahead. We'll be able to sing Under the Sea again. Anything else that is up there will happen. Let's say if there was like a strength adjusting character that got put to the bottom, we may be able to hit something else, but then it will go to the bottom of the deck. Now the second Ursula will resolve. Uh-oh. The card's not there. It's not in the discard. That's why I want to make sure it goes to the discard and then is played from the discard, then goes here, because the second one looks, uh-oh, he is not there. Even if there was another Under the Sea that was in the discard pile, because it is not that card, we can't select that because that's a different card. Everything is a different card. It does not say a card with that name. It says that specific card that we sang with. So the effect resolves much as it can. No target. Effect is finished. 7.1.10 states, some effects instruct the active player to reveal a card or cards. To reveal a card, the player shows the face of the card to all other players in the game. The player can reveal cards only from the group of cards described earlier in the effect. Let's go ahead and resolve our friend Robin Hood again. We will quest. His effect will go off. We'll go to our hand. Ooh, there's an action. We reveal a whole new world. This means we show all the players a whole new world. And then Robin Hood's effect will go off as we discussed earlier. Everyone has to be able to see it, and it's generally good practice to make sure that they confirm what they see. Note that for effects like these, if it does not say reveal, you do not reveal it. Additionally, you can only reveal cards from the group of cards that are there earlier in the effect. So let's say you pick up the 4 cards, and then you say, oh, but I really want to play, like, it calls me. It's in my hand technically, so we'll just kind of say, hey, it calls me. That is an illegal move. It can only be from the ones you have in hand. Let's take a look at our next rule. Let's take a look at action cards. 7.2.1 states, playing an action may trigger other abilities. In that case, the active player resolves the action immediately, and once that action has been fully resolved, players may resolve the triggered abilities as described in section 8.7 bag. Let's see an example of this in practice. We'll go ahead and sing A Whole New World with Jafar. We've talked about A Whole New World before. Let's go ahead and check it out again. A Whole New World. Each player discards their hand and draws 7 cards. Jafar's effect says whenever a player draws a card, you will gain 1 lore. So let's go ahead and resolve this correctly. I've sung A Whole New World. I will discard my hand and attempt to draw 7 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Uh-oh. I don't have any more cards to draw, so I attempt to draw 2 more, and I cannot. At this point, because I have drawn 5 cards, Jafar's 5 effects will go into the bag. But it does not resolve at that moment. We wait for the action to finish. Then my opponent will discard their hand, draw 7. Let's assume that they have the ability to do that. Game state check. The effect is done. Game state check happens. Uh-oh, I attempted to draw cards from my deck when I had none. Even though Jafar could win me the game with that, even though, let's say I had 18 lore, I only needed to draw 2 to win. I did not gain that lore as I drew. It triggered Jafar's effect to gain the lore, but that was added to the bag. But at the game state check, I qualified to lose because I attempted to draw when I could not. That means that once A Whole New World has finished resolving, I lose the game. If I had enough, let's say I was able to draw the 7, fantastic. A Whole New World finishes resolving, we both have 7, then Jafar will have 7 triggers that go off. So I will gain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lore. Congratulations. All individually. They don't happen simultaneously. They happen... it's essentially 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, not plus 7. But yeah, you want to make sure you don't have any interruptions, that you resolve the action, and then any of those triggered abilities will be resolved afterwards, like we'll discuss in Chapter 8. Let's look a little bit at keywords. Keyword abilities are abilities represented by short names that are the same wherever the ability appears. You can see on Jafar we have Shift 5 and Evasive. See Section 10, Keywords, for more information on individual keyword abilities. Keywords are usually followed by reminder text describing what they do. This reminder text, enclosed in parentheses and set in italics, is not rules text, but only a memory aid. So if we're playing, we're like, okay, what does Evasive do? Who can challenge an Evasive character? We have that reminder there, but it is not official rules text. It is just sort of saying, hey, let's just kind of, in case we need to remember what this actually does, or maybe we need to just check a little bit, we have that right there. Triggered abilities. 7.4 talks about triggered abilities. Triggered abilities occur when their trigger condition is met. They trigger only once per trigger condition that is met. Triggered abilities start with when, whenever, at the start of, at the end of, and describe the game state that causes the abilities to trigger and the effects of the abilities. When an ability triggers, its effect is placed into the bag to be resolved in order, as described in section 8.7 bag. So let's start off with our friend Kit Cloudkicker, tough guy. His ability reads, when you play this character, you may return chosen opposing character with 2 or less strength to their player's hand. So when does that trigger happen? It happens when he is played. How many times does it happen? Once, when he is played. So we spend 1, 2, I play Kit Cloudkicker, his effect enters the bag. That means if there are other cards that have effects that can trigger, they will go into the bag at the same time, and we can find out the order of how we want to resolve them. But we'll talk about that later in the bag. I know this video is already getting quite lengthy. Let's just talk about Kit Cloudkicker by himself. When this condition is met, when this is triggered, I can resolve the effect. And let's see, okay, Robin Hood, he has 1 strength. He's gonna go to my opponent's hand. Fantastic. 7.4.4 goes to a little more depth. Some triggered abilities are written as trigger condition if secondary condition effect. These abilities check whether the secondary condition is true, both when the effect would be added to the bag and again when the effect resolves. 7.4.4.1 states, if the secondary condition is false when the effect will be added to the bag, the effect is never added to the bag. 7.4.4.2 states, if the secondary condition is false when the effect will resolve, the triggered ability resolves with no effect. Let's check out how that works. This effect comes up a few times. Usually what this is going to do is that we're going to make sure that the ability can happen both when it enters the bag and when it would resolve. Let's go ahead and check it out with our friend Yen Sid. He states, when you play this character, if you have a character named Magic Broom in play, you may draw a card. And of course we have our wonderful friend Magic Broom Illuminary Keeper. This card states, whenever you play another card, you may banish this character to draw a card. Let's see a few scenarios where Yen Sid's effect may or may not go off. We're going to start with the first one. I spend 2, 1, 2. I play Yen Sid. Do I have Magic Broom? No. His effect does not enter the bag. Even if magically a Magic Broom comes from the sky and goes in, because the effect never entered the bag, it never goes off. Let's say Magic Broom is on the field, though. We spend 1, 2 to play Yen Sid. Fantastic. We've met the condition for Yen Sid. Perfect. But we've also met the condition for Magic Broom. So we can go ahead and order this in a very specific way. And based on how we order it, because they both happen simultaneously, we are able to decide what happens. So let's say, okay, well, all right, I'll play Yen Sid for 2, and then we'll resolve Magic Broom's ability, Banish to draw. I draw a card, fantastic. Now we're gonna resolve Yen Sid's ability. Do we get Yen Sid's ability? No. That is because even though the condition was true when it was added to the bag, the secondary condition is false when the effect would resolve. So, because he is resolving and there is not a Magic Broom in play, I do not draw a card. If we play it the other way, where we choose Yen Sid's effect to go first, we say, okay, first we'll resolve Yen Sid. Is there a broom in play? Yes. We draw a card. Then I'll resolve Magic Broom's ability, Banish to draw. We will have drawn 2 cards just from ordering things correctly. 7.4.5 talks about some triggered abilities are written as trigger condition, effect, period, effect. Both effects are linked to the trigger condition but are independent of each other. Here we have Moana of Montanui, which I also do not own. This states, whenever this character quests, you may ready your other princess characters. They can't quest for the rest of the turn. Now, while there are many other cards that talk about they can't quest, this one is very specific because we look at a wide variety of cards. Many times we'll say, okay, that card cannot quest, or the cards you have chosen cannot quest or challenge. This says princess characters. This is all princess characters may be readied. Because of this wording, because it says they, referring to the princess characters, they cannot quest for the rest of the turn, meaning any princess characters. However, most of the time when you see this effect, when it says they, it'll refer to that card or this card. So make sure you're looking at text to make sure you see what it is going to affect. For instance, here we have try everything. Remove up to 3 damage from chosen character and ready them. So let's say we are going to remove 2 damage from Robin Hood and ready him. Because he is the chosen character, he cannot quest or challenge for the rest of this turn. The card that is being targeted, or can be targeted, is the one that is affected by the second sentence. They can't quest or challenge. Now our second example, once again, we're going to, I promise I have more exciting examples, but for this, especially the very more specific stuff, it's kind of best to go with the examples that are in the book, just because they tend to be the most popular ones. We have Scar, Vicious Cheater. Scar, Vicious Cheater says, during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may ready this character. He can't quest for the rest of the turn. Magic Broom is here. Scar comes in. He says, okay, we're going to take out Magic Broom. We will go ahead and he'll have 1 damage dealt to him because Magic Broom had 1 strength, but he'll be able to be ready again if we use his ability. However, he can't quest for the rest of the turn if we do that. If we choose not to use his ability, let's say we just hang out here and Scar just sits as normal. If he doesn't challenge anything, he can quest just fine. But as long as as we have used the effect that says that we ready him, he cannot quest for the rest of that turn. It is tied to the trigger condition. Let's take a look at this with Simba fighting Prince. So read it again. Some triggered abilities are written as trigger condition and trigger condition effect. These abilities function as having 2 triggered abilities that are independent of each other, but both resolve for the same effect. So when we play Simba fighting Prince, it has 2 abilities. When you play this character, or 2 triggers, when you play this character and whenever he banishes another character in a challenge during your turn, you may choose one of 2 effects. Let's say we'll get Broom back out there. I spend 7 to play Simba. This effect will activate. I can choose, okay, I'm going to deal 2 damage to Broom. Okay, that goes. Or I draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. Now let's say Simba challenges Broom. That'll go off. He'll be exerted. He'll take 1 damage. That effect will go off again. It does not have to be having both. It can't be both. You can't play a character and immediately have them challenge. Even with a rush character, you still play the character, then you challenge afterwards. But those are just the 2 times where it happens. 7.4.7 states, some abilities and effects create a trigger condition that lasts a duration of time where they exist and can occur. These usually are created as a result of a resolving action. They are functional only for the stated duration. Once that duration has passed, the trigger condition ceases to exist. These are known as floating triggered abilities. Let's go ahead and take a look at one of my favorite cards, Pete, Games Referee. This states, when you play this character, opponents can't play actions until the start of your next turn. Once Pete is played, it creates a ability that is floating, a floating triggered ability. So now, because it is played, there is now a rule that opponents cannot play actions until the start of my next turn, this player's next turn. So that means that no matter what happens to Pete, no matter if he is on the field, off the field, if we banish him or whatnot, that floating trigger is still there. It's floating in the mystic air of the game space. So my opponent can't sing Whole New World, they can't brawl me, they can't use anything that has action marked on it until the start of my next turn, which we talked about in the gameplay section. Once we enter the set phase, Pete's ability ends, because that is the start of our next turn. Let's take a look at activated abilities. Activated abilities are abilities that a player chooses to use. They are normally written as cost-effect. While there are no effects waiting to resolve and a character isn't questing or in a challenge, the active player may use an activated ability. To use an activated ability, the active player follows these steps in order. If any part of this process can't be performed, it's illegal to use the ability. These steps apply to all activated abilities. Only the active player can use activated abilities. First, let's do an example with our wonderful friend, the Lamp, and our good friend, Jafar. The Lamp reads, banish this item, dash. If you have a character named Jafar in play, draw 2 cards. If you have a character named Genie in play, return chosen character with cost 4 or less to their player's hand. So we'll start with 7.5.3.1. First, the active player announces the ability they intend to use. I'm going to use the Lamp's ability. Second, the player follows the steps described in 4.3.4.4 through 4.3.4.6. We're replacing any instance of the word card with the word ability. So we're sort of throwing ourselves back there. My goodness. Let's take a look at that section. We look here at 4.3.4.4. We say, okay, how are we going to play the card? Well, we'll pay the cost, which is, for this one, is just banishing the item. So we determine the cost of that, and then we pay the cost, which is just banishing. And now that we've banished it, we can resolve the effect. Where we have a card named Jafar in play, we're going to draw 2 cards. And then we can go to our next action. We're going to do a little bit of scrolling all the way back down to our wonderful section we were just at. Look how much we've covered. How amazing that is, that we've been able to cover so much in this very fun video. We'll go ahead and go all the way down to where we were celebrating our activated abilities. 7.5.4 states, if an effect would trigger as a result of any of the steps to using activated ability, that effect waits to resolve until the ability is fully resolved. So let's say with the Lamp, we had Jafar exerted. For those that don't remember, Jafar's effect, when he is exerted, when I draw a card during my turn, I gain 2 lore. So let's say I'm going to use Lamp. I'll banish it, and I will draw 2 cards. I don't gain the lore then. I wait until the Lamp is fully resolved. Once the Lamp is fully resolved, then Jafar's 2 effects that have entered the bag will resolve, and I will gain 2 lore. Let's go down to static abilities. Static abilities are effects that can alter characteristics of a card, game rule, or game state. They are continuously active for the stated length of time. A static ability that doesn't specify a duration is continuously active for as long as the card is generating the effect. 7.6 talks about static abilities. Static abilities are effects that could alter the characteristics of a card, game rule, or game state. These are continuously active for the stated length of time. A static ability that doesn't specify a duration is continuously active for as long as the card generating the effect is in play. Let's take a look at an old card that we spent a lot of time looking at earlier in this series. Tropical Rainforest Jungle Layer. This states opposing damaged characters gain Reckless. They can't quest and must challenge if able. So let's say that Jafar is on field. Jafar, while Tropical Rainforest is up, has Reckless. But let's say that Jafar and Pete are on field, and let's say they're both able to attack. They're both dry. Even if they are both damaged, right now they both have Reckless. Whenever they both challenge and take out Tropical Rainforest, they no longer have Reckless, because there is no duration that is specified, so it is just as long as it is on the field. So immediately, they are no longer Reckless. They are exerted, so they can't quest, but they are no longer considered having that keyword, and any effects that would affect things with those keywords no longer apply. Of course, if a card says a duration of time, we will follow that. Let's take a look at Maui's Fishhook. Maui's Fishhook has multiple effects. We'll be looking at the second one. Choose one. So we'll exert and pay 2 ink to choose one. Chosen character gains evasive until the start of your next turn. So I could say Magic Broom is evasive until the start of my next turn. Or I could say chosen character gets +3 strength this turn. Great. We'll gain +3 strength for this turn. Even if I don't do anything, he'll still have +3 strength until I say end of turn. Turn passes, he no longer has that +3 strength. It is static until the duration ends. Cards played that would be affected by a static ability have that effect as they come into play. If this modifies their strength or willpower, they are considered to enter play with that adjusted strength or willpower. So you would see that cards like Sisu, Emboldened Warrior, which gains +1 strength for each card in opponent's hands, will enter the field with as many cards as are in the opponent's hands. So if they have 5, she will enter the game with 6 strength. She is not considered to enter with 1 and then gain 5. That is just the amount that Sisu enters with. Some static abilities occur as the result of resolving ability or effect. Once resolved, the static ability continues to apply to the affected cards for the specified duration. Cards that would be affected by a static ability but enter play after the ability or effect is resolved aren't affected by the static effect. Let's look at more cards I don't own. This is Kita, Protector of Atlantis. Her effect reads, when you play this character, all characters get -3 strength until the start of your next turn. Fantastic. So we'll go ahead and let's pretend this is Kita. We're all on board and we say, boom, Kita. Everything gets -3 strength until the start of my next turn. Then I play Maui. How much strength does Maui have? Well, because it triggered when I played the character, Maui came after that trigger, so he is not affected by Kita. Instead, Maui can have sort of free reign on whatever he wants to hit at the legal target, so not Jafar because he has evasive, but he can hit Pete, take no damage because Pete has -3 strength, and go on from there. Some static abilities are part of the characteristics of a card. These static abilities remain on as long as the card generating the effect is in play. If a card generating a static ability leaves play, the effect ends as soon as the card is removed from the play zone. There's no point at which an affected card will still have the ability and then lose it. So for 7.6.4, let's take a look at Peter Pan Shadowfinder. Peter Pan Shadowfinder states he has Rush Evasive. Your other characters with Evasive gain Rush. Let's say, okay, so now we spend 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We'll go ahead and play our wonderful friend Jafar, who has Evasive. So now Jafar has Rush. Let's say Peter Pan starts off by taking out Pete. So Pete will be banished. Peter Pan will be banished. Does Jafar still have Rush? No, because Peter Pan was applying that ability to Jafar. And now the card is left play. The effect is over. It does not stay. So Jafar is, because he's wet, cannot do anything. He just kind of sits there. Now for 7.6.5, we'll say some static effects apply outside the play zone. They specify the aspect and time they apply to. Of course, we always love our wonderful friend Pluto, who has helped us so much. He doesn't affect anything on board. He affects the player. So when I exert him, he'll affect the player who is outside the play zone. Let's take a look at our next section here. 7.7 talks about replacement effects. Some effects are considered replacement effects. These effects wait for the stated condition to occur and then partially or completely replace the event as the effect resolves. Abilities that include the word instead are the most common type of replacement effect. Let's take a look here at Seven Dwarfs Mine, Secure Fortress. This effect states, during your turn, the first time you move a character here, you may deal 1 damage to chosen character. If the moved character is a knight, deal 2 damage instead. Let's go ahead and see how that works. We're going ahead and we have our character here, Sneezy. Let's take a look at Sneezy. Sneezy is a 4-cost, 3 strength, 4 willpower character. His effect is, when you play this character, chosen knight character gains challenger +2 this turn. Now, let's look at his identifications. He's Dreamborn, he's an ally, he's a knight, and he is part of the 7 dwarves. So what that means is that we can move him, well, we can move anyone to the castle, but something will happen when we move him. So I'm going to go ahead and spend 1, 2 to move Sneezy into the castle. 7 Dwarfs Mine will go off. It'll say, the first time I move a character here, I may deal 1 damage, but because Sneezy is a knight, instead of dealing 1 damage, I'll go ahead and deal 2 damage to Rudy. In essence, it replaces the original effect with the new effect because of the change condition. There are some other fun effects that happen that are replacement effects. Abilities that read this character enters or this character may enter are replacement effects. Right here we have Great Stone Dragon. The first effect is this item enters play exerted. It replaces how we normally play a card, and instead says it's going to be exerted. So even if we wanted to, we can't, if I pay 3 and play that card, I can't use it this turn because it's already exerted. Of course, it'll be ready at the start of my next set phase, but until then, it stays exerted. Replacement effects happen once and need to exist before the event would occur. If an event is replaced, it never happens. A modified event occurs, and the new event may trigger abilities. Abilities that would have triggered from the original event don't see it, and therefore they don't trigger. Now 7.7.5 states, only one replacement effect can replace a specific effect. If there are multiple replacement effects for the same specific effect, the player who played the card that generated the effect being replaced chooses which effect replaces it. So in the event that multiple different triggers can happen, multiple different situations, we have the ability, much like with any other choice we have the ability to decide how that resolves. Let's take a look a little bit further at 7.8, Ability Modifiers. Some abilities and effects can modify the characteristics of a character. Whenever a new modifier is applied to a card, a calculation is made for that card's current characteristics, taking into account previous modifying effects that were applied to the character. Let's look a little bit down. If a character has negative strength, it deals 0 damage during challenges. We already looked at this when talking about challenges, that characters can have negative strength. However, functionally, they work as 0. If a character or location has a negative lore value, It counts as having a lore value of 0 for the purpose of determining lore while in play. Let's go ahead and make sure. Okay. So no other things here. Let's go ahead and see some examples of this. Let's go back to our card, Kita, which I don't own. Kita states, when you play this character, all characters get -3 strength until the start of your next turn. So let's assume a few things. Let's assume that my opponent just finished their turn and that Kita was played right before the end phase. So Piglet currently has -3 strength. I start my turn and I decide, okay, I'm going to spend 1 to play the Ruby Chromacon. Let's see what that does. Ruby Chromacon states I can exert it, and my character gets +1 strength for the turn. So I say, okay, I'm going to exert Ruby Chromacon. I'm going to give +1 strength to Piglet. Let's check out Piglet. He is a 2-cost, 2 strength, 2 willpower character. And we just gave him +1 strength. So how much strength would Piglet have right now? That's right, he would be at 0 strength. That's because he's receiving the -3 from Kita and a +1 from Ruby Chromacon. So in essence, he is currently at -2 strength. So that means that even if Piglet were to challenge Seven Dwarfs Mine, it would do 0 damage. It would just be a way to exert him if you so chose. And this works similarly for lore. If there's ever a situation where a character's lore counter is minused, it functionally works as negative. So if you can gain a lore counter, that will take into account the previous effect of the minusing lore. So always make sure when you're doing modifiers that you're keeping everything in mind, because it is cumulative. It is essentially the essence. If we had the actual, starter deck type things where they have the physical counters, it is essentially saying, okay, here's a -1, here's a -1, here's a -1, and then let's say here's a +1. These two cancel out. We're left with -2. And that is all of Chapter 7. You can see it is a pretty beefy chapter. I even changed clothes because I had to go do things in the middle of it. So lots of big changes, but overall, a very important section for understanding how cards operate and how cards work. We only have 3 sections left, talking about zones. Lots of zones. That's going to be a big one too. Section 9 is a little smaller, just with damage counters, which we've pretty much already been talking about today. And then 10 are just the wonderful keywords, the many words we've talked about a lot that we haven't quite gotten into yet. And then we're all done with it. So how wonderful it is that we're getting so close to finishing this. Thank you so much for being on this wonderful journey, and we'll hopefully see you in the next one.